Hi and welcome to Tengi Talks TV and Movies, and today I am very excited to be taking a look at the 1972 telemovie The Night Stalker. This is the film that inspired the legendary series Kolchak the Night Stalker, starring everyone's favourite paranormal investigative reporter Carl Kolchak, played by the wonderful Darren McGavin. Now, I love the Night Stalker TV series, but I had never seen either of the two telemovies that inspired it, so I thought, why not take a look? And I might even go on to review the whole series if anyone's interested in seeing that, so do let me know if you are down in the comments. The Night Stalker was based on the then unpublished novel The Kolchak Papers by Jeff Rice, and it was adapted by one of my favourite screenwriters, Richard Matheson, who I think I really should do a whole separate video about because he was behind so many of the films I love, as well as some of the great Twilight Zone episodes. When The Night Stalker debuted in 1972, it got the highest ratings of any TV movie at that time. So on this, its 50th anniversary year, let's take a closer look at the movie and find out what all the fuss was about. The plot. Journalist Carl Kolchak sits in a shambolic room listening to his tape-recorded notes about a shocking case he has just investigated as he writes up his story, a story he believes will be covered up. In flashback, we follow Kolchak's investigation of a series of strange murders in Las Vegas, where the victims were all found drained of blood. But when Kolchak begins to suspect that the killer might be a vampire, no one will believe him. With the police unable to capture the killer, Kolchak strikes out on his own, knowing that he is the only one able to destroy the creature. Kolchak believes he has the scoop of a lifetime, but with authorities determined to conceal the true nature of the serial killer, Kolchak risks losing everything as a casualty of the police and government cover-up. What's interesting about this telemovie? Well, I love that it starts with the image of Kolchak and his tape recorder. It's such an integral part of the TV series and a lovely bit of what was then the current top technology of its time. Brilliantly dramatic and intriguing opening voiceover. It just immediately draws us in with the suggestions of cover-up, conspiracy, and the suggestion of something so shocking it's almost unspeakable. I also love the dishevelled state we first meet Kolchak in, and his room is such a mess. It's great economical character building. What's happened to him? Likewise, Kolchak's rusty beat-up car. Who is this guy? He talks about himself like he's a top journalist, but he doesn't seem to be doing too well. The faux documentary or mock journalistic style is a great foundation for a paranormal story. The Las Vegas locations look amazing on the screen. Some bold and distinctive choices in the way this is filmed too. It combines that reportage style with more audacious shots like the shot from the point of view of the murder victim on the autopsy table. Great character building across the board here, from Kolchak's wry character sketch of his editor Tony Vincenzo to the murder victim who is humanized by Kolchak's description. This is something we don't always see in films like this. And this is also done very well in the scene where Kolchak makes a jokey remark at the murder scene and is bluntly reminded that the victim's mother is close by. The film is urging us and Kolchak not to forget that these women have value as human beings. The movie portrays women as very much outside of the structures of power in this world. This is especially true of the casino workers who are the vampire's victims. I also love how desperate Kolchak is to warn people about the vampire through his reports, even while others don't seem as concerned about the murders. He does seem to care about the women the vampire is targeting in a way that others don't, perhaps because his girlfriend is just such a woman, another casino worker. Some of the other male characters seem to see women as little more than toys here. The murder scene where the woman is found in the sand with no footprints around the body is really creepy and introduces the idea of something unnatural or supernatural in a very low-key and unsettling way. Even the first mention of vampires is low-key, in the context of mental illness, someone being deluded about being a vampire, and they joke about how ridiculous this idea is. All of this grounds the story in such a strong sense of realism. The idea of actual vampirism is introduced slowly. The murders, the theft of blood from the hospital, each time taking some degree of certainty away from our expectation that this will just be an ordinary serial killer story. It's almost half an hour in before we actually get a glimpse of the vampire and his blood-rimmed eyes. Interesting that this is not the sexy type of vampire, it's the scary animalistic type, which is very similar to the feral type of vampire Jack Palance brought us in 1974 in another Dan Curtis movie, which was also scripted by Richard Matheson. The backstory about the vampire posing as a doctor in the London Blitz in order to have access to blood is brilliantly inventive. Aspects of this, such as getting blood from hospitals, do seem to have inspired other vampire films that followed this one. Now, the idea of a journalist delving into the world of vampires does seem to anticipate Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire, which was published only 4 years later in 1976. I love the realism of the way the characters interact here. It's just a world of petty acrimony, characters who get on each other's nerves, and Kolchak rubs everyone the wrong way and seems so at odds with the establishment who don't like his determination to expose the truth. This really effectively sets up Kolchak as an underdog and outsider. Kolchak has a girlfriend in this movie. I recall him as being much more of a loner in the later series. Great musical score in this film by Bob Colbert. It's very ominous, moody, it combines jazz elements and more traditional touches like strings. Now, why is Vincenzo a bit sexy in this movie? I think it's the open shirts and lack of a tie. He doesn't come across that way in the series at all. Likewise, shirtless Kolchak. Everyone is a bit sexy here. I guess they just went in a different direction with the series. Really impressive fight scenes and stunts here, especially the hospital fight scene, and the motorbike crash is genuinely shocking and looks really dangerous. Equally shocking, the moment when Kolchak finds the woman the vampire is keeping prisoner in his house as some kind of living blood bank. This is super creepy, really horrific. Nice references to Hammer's 1958 Dracula and the use of sunlight to weaken the vampire here. The scene where Kolchak suggests giving every cop a vampire hunting kit and the cops counter with the legal problems involved in officers hammering stake through a suspect's heart is pure genius. This is not something I've seen in any other vampire movie. And the brilliant thing is they come back to this after Kolchak has to stake the vampire. The police want to charge him with murder, but it's clear the police are just doing this because Kolchak has not played by their rules. This kind of betrayal by the authorities sets the tone for the later series very effectively. The ending is actually quite upsetting in that the authorities also break up Kolchak's engagement and drive his fiancée out of town. This goes way beyond what I remember about the endings in the TV series as far as the personal stakes go for Kolchak. There is a note of uncertainty also about what happens to his fiancée at the end. Is it implied that she might have been killed? Kolchak says he has searched for her, but he could never find her. And what happened to the victim of the vampire who was still alive in the house? As Kolchak says, all those who've been bitten by the vampire can return as a vampire. This is a really interesting and unsettling note to end on, and it does leave that crypt door open for more Kolchak adventures. At the end, Kolchak really does look like he's been through a terrible ordeal, and it is really cost him a lot. His career, his fiancée, everything. The end titles run over silence. There's no closing music in the print I watched, which compounds that unsettling tone of the ending. The cast and crew. Director John Llewellyn Moxey had strong horror credentials with City of the Dead and Circus of Fear to his name, as well as some great TV shows including The Avengers, The Saint, The Edgar Wallace Mysteries, many others. He really did a superb job with this movie. Darren McGavin is only 50 here. He's my age. I'm age appropriate for Carl Kolchak, so I guess I've got that going for me. But seriously, What is it about Darren McGavin that makes him so instantly likeable? He just has that indefinable something, like charisma, charm on the screen. There's something really reassuring about him that always shines through. Kolchak seems like the part he was born to play, and I can't imagine anyone else bringing the humour, that twinkle in the eye combined with the dramatic chops he delivers. Also, I find his slightly bandy-legged walk very endearing. Simon Oakland had a great career that included such classics as Psycho and West Side Story. He's one of those great character actors who appeared in everything, and he added so much to any project. I like the way we saw a moment of real admiration between Kolchak and Vincenzo in this movie, as well as their usual friction. Carol Lynley is perhaps best known for the Poseidon Adventure, but she appeared in many films and TV shows. She doesn't really get much to do in this film, but she does bring a nice quality to her role as Kolchak's fiancée. And I really like that faint suggestion of uncertainty at the end after she accepts his proposal, which makes her final disappearance all the more enigmatic. Elisha Cook Jr. is best known for his work in film noir, and he is always such a pleasure to see on screen. He can do so much with even such a small role as this. Larry Linville of MASH fame plays a very different type of character here. It's really nice to see him in a different role. Barry Atwater, who played the vampire, had a pretty interesting career that included roles in Twilight Zone, Star Trek, The Outer Limits, among many others. Those are quite the cult TV credentials, and the way he plays the vampire here is different. It's unusual. He's kind of unknowable, and there's this sort of wall that we can't get behind, in the same way that a predatory animal is unknowable. I guess this vampire doesn't want to be known, and maybe that is the point. To sum up, I really enjoyed The Night Stalker, and I found it very interesting from a number of perspectives. I'm wondering if this very urban, low-key, grittily realistic treatment of the vampire story and the idea of a journalist investigating a vampire is perhaps the first to tackle the genre in this way. I don't mean just the fact that it's set in the present day. I mean, the Universal Dracula was set in the present day of its time in the 1930s. What I mean specifically is approaching a vampire story like it's a police procedural or journalistic investigation. Now, I could be wrong, but I think this might well be the first film to do that. And if you know of any before this, please leave a comment about it. I can very much see the influence of this film in others that followed it, and especially that telemovie from 1979, Vampire, which I also reviewed on this channel. I like that The Night Stalker's vampire is not a romantic vampire. I like that it's doing something really different, and I love how it brings in those elements of realism that are usually lacking from this genre, like the legal problems of staking a vampire. The most compelling aspect of all of this, of course, is Kolchak himself. He's an eccentric, a lovable outsider, willing to consider possibilities that the authorities won't, and usually coming off second best in the face of that authority. He's in many ways a loser. He's always been fired for his maverick attitude, getting his scoops taken away by those with power. He never reaches the level in his career that we know he's capable of, but he never gives up, and he maintains that dry sense of humour about human nature in the world, even after all his setbacks and weird experiences. What this initial film does so well is to establish Kolchak as an underdog crusader for the truth, an outsider facing opposition from the powers above, something he is not deterred by. This is really engaging a sort of Robin Hood archetype, but it's the truth rather than wealth that Kolchak wants to steal from the rich and powerful and give to the rest of us. He's on a quest which makes him seem like a kind of shambolic modern-day knight, and all of this is tremendously appealing. Kolchak appears before us here fully formed, totally believable as a weathered man with an interesting story and a strong drive to uncover the truth. The way he seems so damaged in the framing narration really is touching and adds a note of vulnerability that I don't think was explored in quite this way in this TV series, which I think maintained a lighter touch. He seems really exposed at the end and quite beaten up psychologically as well as physically. So I'm ready to look at more Kolchak adventures. If you have thoughts about this movie, or if you'd like to see me review more of The Night Stalker, please leave a comment down below. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you'd hit like and subscribe for more weird film fun, and I really hope I see you next time. Bye!